Trying the potter's wheel. I have always wanted to try the pottery wheel ever since I was a small boy. Occasionally I would go to a ceramics class, where they had one, with my mother. For some reason I became immediately fascinated with it. I begged and begged for her to let me try it, but she said I was too small. The opportunity would not present itself again for a long, long time, in a place far, far away. The notion of doing pottery never really crossed my mind again until recently, when I decided I wanted to do something more creative in my spare time. Since leaving Canada behind, along with many of my favorite pastimes, there has been somewhat of a void in my life. The time seemed right to look for something here to help get my mind off work and alleviate some stress. Maybe pottery was the answer. I had told a few people that I was looking into taking a pottery class of some kind, and asked if they knew of a place where I could do this. Luckily, Luke had a friend who knew of someone near Beto who gave public classes. I eagerly told him to set a date and time for us to attend. Susan, Sophia, Julie, and May would also come along. Mr. and Mrs. Wong kindly greeted us upon arrival. They led us to their quaint little workshop in the backyard where the class was to be held. Inside they offered us tea and some snacks while we got acquainted and checked out some of their work. Their hospitality was above and beyond the call of duty, to say the least. I was the first to take a turn on the potter's wheel. Mr. Wong gave me a short demonstration to give me a general idea of what to do. He pointed out various parts of the machine as well, and Luke translated as best he could, given that he was new to this as well. Mr. Wong was more than patient with the language barrier, and waited for Luke to explain to me what was going on. Finally, it was time to take the helm, the moment I'd waited for since I was a young boy. The clay first needed to be worked by hand to soften it up a bit, and it also had to be formed into a cone-like shape that was flat on the bottom where it would sit securely on the wheel. I did a poor job with this part, so my teacher helped out to get me going. Once the clay was stuck in the center of the wheel, I gently pressed down on the foot pedal at the base of the wheel that controlled the speed of rotation, and the wheel began to turn. I wet my hands in the water, then cupped them around the mound of clay. It was still quite hard, and so it had to be worked over with my hands to make it more pliable, but it couldn't be too soft either, or it wouldn't hold its shape. By pushing my hands slowly together on the sides of the mound, it rose up, and by pushing downward on the top, the clay widened. I did this several times before my teacher said the clay was ready. The next step was to use my hands to create a hole in the center of the clay. As my thumbs pressed gently into the soft clay, the hole gradually took shape. It was important that the hole didn't get too deep, or the pot that I was making would have a hole in the base, a lesson that Luke would later learn the hard way. While my thumbs enlarged the cavity, the heel of my hands held the clay centered and prevented the base from expanding out as I pushed down. In effect, your hands are like a free-form mold. With the hole in the center now about the size I wanted, I began to contour the sides and the pot began to take form. Really, you just want to move your hands little by little, applying delicate pressure as you go, and the wheel will do most of the work for you. The only concern is that the sides are not too thin, or the pot will begin to wobble and twist out of shape. It may also collapse under its own weight. Conversely, you don't want them to be too thick either, or heavier than necessary. Using one hand on the inside, I pushed gently outward toward my other hand that cupped the outside. The pot began to take a bulbous shape that I found quite pleasing. As I worked my way up, I used my index finger and thumb to create a lip on the top of the pot. Then I made sure that everything was nice, smooth, and uniform. The boss took over again and made some finishing touches. Then he used a piece of wire to cut the pot off the wheel. Unfortunately, that was all I could do for now, as the pot would have to sit and dry before anything else could be done to it. Tomorrow Mr. Wong could use a special tool to cut excess clay off the bottom so that it would be perfectly flat. Then it would have to sit for a week or two in order to be dry enough to put into the kiln. Though I wanted to see the finished product as soon as possible, I would be forced to wait. I had almost forgotten about the pot when Luke brought the finished piece to the cram school where we both work. I quickly opened the box and removed the protective wrapping to have a look. It was beautiful. It was everything I had dreamt it would be, even more. Okay, maybe it wasn't worth putting into an art gallery, but in my eyes it was the most beautiful pot in the world, and something I had waited a long, long time to make. Thank you to Mr. and Mrs. Wong for helping me to fulfill a lifelong ambition.